Okay, so background stories. I feel like I've been kind of talking about background stories throughout this whole video. When you look out at like a crowd of people, and if you think each person has a story, each person has a reason for their actions. When you see people act a certain way or do certain things, and we're like, what is wrong with these people? What really has us curious, is really piques our interest, is the fact that what caused them to act the way that they did? What happened in their life? What are their belief systems that are making them think that this action is, you know, the action that they chose, whatever that may be. So for your characters, you're doing the same thing because you're writing about life. Even if it's a fantasy, even if it has, dragons or fairies or whatever's in it, everybody has a story. Everybody has a background story. So um it's it's great to do for the heroes. It's great to do for even just for me. Like I do it for almost every character in my book has a background story, even the villains. Um, the only villain, because I write a lot of spiritual fiction. The only villain that doesn't have a background story, he does have a background story, but I don't pay attention to it because I feel like everybody already knows his background story, and that is Satan. So I don't really care about his background story. We already know his story, so whatever. Um, but the people that choose to do wicked things, the villains of the book, um, they like, what led them down that path? What made them make the choices that they make? With the heroes, let me see. Again, I'm always going to be using people for my book or characters for my book because that's what I can best explain. Um, May was in the beginning of the series. May is very, very quiet, very, like I said, she's kind of like a recluse, right? And she does not, uh, she doesn't even like really hang out at anything. She really does nothing. Um, she studies, goes to school, gets good grades. She's not trying to date nobody because of this, and so there's a lot of people who act that way, but for different reasons. Some people, that's just that their parents ain't playing that. They don't have a choice. Their parents are just not having that. um May, when you go into her home life, you realize her mom really doesn't hound her to study. Her mom doesn't need to, but her mom doesn't really, because if you look at her sister is almost like the total opposite of her. um May, she moves differently. And then as you get to understand her background stories because of what she experienced in her life at a young age, what she dealt with and how she felt about herself and what beliefs she developed, you start to understand that. And when the reader starts to understand that, May becomes more real. May becomes someone that they can really empathize with because they can understand where she's coming from. And then you look at the villain of the book, which his name is Thomas. I know, don't judge me. It's my last name, but I don't I don't know. I don't know what I was thinking. As I said in the beginning, I was never good at picking names. Anyway, the villain of the book, his name is Thomas. Now, Thomas, you got to think of like what caused him to do the things that he did. And it goes into the background. With him, it was a lot of jealousy um, that caused him to take the actions that he took. He's also just kind of sick and twisted in a way, or not in a way. He's sick and twisted, and but the root of him is that this jealousy just kind of tumbled him down this wrong path. He's just not a good person. He's just not a good person. But it's not to make the reader sympathize with him and say, okay, well, you know what? I understand why he did this or understand why he did that. It's basically to say, this is why he does this. This is why he believes this. And it doesn't mean that they're always going to agree with it. So you're not trying to make the character likable. You're not trying to make every character likable unless you want them to be likable, unless you want them to have compassion for the villain or feel like the villain may actually be right, which is another. strategy or storytelling style, which is not bad. It's how you tell your story. It's all up to you. But their background, just giving them a really good, strong background story, it makes the character come to life, not just for the reader, but for you as the author, as the writer. The character, you're going to be able to really hear and understand both the villains and your heroes a lot better. So, background stories are important. Do not skip that step.